We continue our adventures in Immanuel Kant's Metaphysics with the cosmos. Kant claims it's a mistake to assume we can reason about the entire cosmos. Why? Well, as he sees it, we have but fragments of experience about the world. We do not experience it in its entirety. This is an epistemic limit. Now, our good dead friend John Locke, in his epistemology, looks at the question of, how do we get the notion of infinity? Our good dead friend Descartes, in his Meditations, argues that if we have an idea of infinity, we can't create that ourselves. We have to have, some origin of that from an infinite thing. And not surprisingly, Descartes uses this to argue for God. You have this idea of infinity. It can't come from yourself. You can't, create it. So there must be something that is infinite. And then, of course, this leads to God. Now, in Locke's case, disagreeing with our good dead friend Descartes, Locke takes the view in his epistemology that you can take our finite experiences and just keep sort of multiplying them and then create an idea of infinity. That we can also, of course, reason about the entire world. To use an analogy, Locke's view is kind of like copy-paste, where you can, take what you have, copy it, paste it, and just keep copying and pasting it, and compound these finite, experiences just over and over and over again. And so Locke believes we can take our finite experiences, combine them, and get this complex idea of the whole burrito, the whole enchilada, everything. Now, Kant disagrees with this, and his reasoning is that to think about the entire world properly, we would need a godlike perspective. That is to say, we have to perceive it, outside of space and time. And going back to his epistemology, we would have to go beyond our human methods of conceptualizing experience. Roughly put, we'd have to exceed the capacity of the human mind in order to, experience the entire cosmos. We'd have to be like God. And so he thinks we can't do this. And again, this is a matter of debate. Locke thinks that we can just keep adding stuff and adding stuff and adding stuff, and then, get this notion of the whole thing, the whole cosmos. And both Descartes and Kant say, no, you can't do that. And so reason ends up failing us here. How so? Well, Kant sees reason as being limited. If we try to go beyond its proper limits, we end up in this swamp of inconsistency. So the way he argues for this is his presentation of the antinomies of reason. For him, an antimony or antinomy is a pair of seemingly plausible claims that are actually contraries. And in logic, contraries cannot both be true. So what are these antinomies? Well, the first pair is this. 1. The world has a beginning in time and occupies finite space. Second one. The world has no temporal beginning and is spatially and temporally infinite. Now again, they're both seemingly plausible because there are philosophers, thinkers who endorse both. But of course, they both can't be true. The world either, if it has a beginning in time and occupies finite space, then it is not the case that it is no temporal beginning and it can't be infinite. So that's the first pair. Second pair. All things can be analyzed into basic components. Second, of the second pair, nothing can be analyzed into basic components. Obviously, those cannot both be true, because an all claim and a nothing claim can't both be true. Third pair, the first of the third is some events are free and not determined. The second, no events are free and all events are determined. And lastly, a necessary being exists, and then, of course, there is no necessary being. So those are the famous antinomies. So what's his argument? Well, what he does is, much like the early skeptics, and in the epistemology class, we take a look at the early skeptics who do what's called the two-face method. Not two-faced like the Batman villain, but two-faced in the sense of you argue for one position, then you give a great argument for it, utterly convincing, and then you turn around and argue for the exact opposite with a great argument, utterly convincing. And early skeptics took the view that you could argue just as well for any side of an issue, and therefore it seems like you can't know. So what Kant does is this. He argues for each of these pairs. And of course they're contraries, so the pairs can't both be true. And this shows that reasoning on the topics leads to inconsistency. So there are good reasons for, the first of the pair, good reasons for the second of the pair. They both can't be true. Something's got to go wrong. So what he ends up sort of concluding is that for each of the pairs, the first one is what he regards as a rationalist position. And the second of each pair he regards as a empiricist position. And again, rationalists believe that you can know at least some things by pure reason, typically believe in innate ideas. In terms of what you can know through pure reason, it'd be some things about the world, some things that exist. The empiricists deny this. They say that there are no innate ideas, and whatever you know about the world, you have to know through empirical experience, through the senses. Now, Kant claims that both of these views, rationalism and empiricism, are dogmatic. That is to say, they're sticking to their views and not properly justified. Now, he is rather sympathetic to the rationalist. It does claim that if we, reject God, reject free will, reject immortality, and more on this later, then moral ideas and principles lose all validity. So he's doing, the view that you need to have, he does argue this in his ethics, that you need to have God, freedom, and immortality to have ethics. And if you don't, you don't. But he does agree that metaphysical claims are unprovable dogma. So the problem with the rationalists and the empiricists, both of them, is that they presuppose that we know what we cannot know. Now they're making kind of equal but different mistakes. The rationalist mistake, according to Kant, is they're making claims about the noumena, about what is really real for real behind the phenomena. And again, in Kant's epistemology, that's impossible. The empiricist limits the world to the phenomena, and their mistake is this limit, but also assuming that the appearances, the phenomena, are the same as the noumena. And so the empiricists are making a mistake as well. So the rationalist mistake is they're talking about the noumena, which according to Kant, they just can't, that just doesn't work. And the empiricist mistake is they are treating the phenomena as the noumena, which is also wrong. So for Kant, they're all wrong. So how does he resolve this? Well, he resolves the first two by asserting that both are false, because they mistakenly assume that we can reason about the world as a totality. So he resolves the first two, resolving them some more, by asserting that the second of each pair is true in terms of the phenomena, while the first could be true of the noumena. So statements about the noumena cannot be part of our theoretical knowledge. But, and this is where you can be seen as kind of like cheating or being brilliant or brilliantly cheating, he does consider they could be the result of intellectual presuppositions, sort of, assumptions, and also faith. Now, viewed as scientific phenomena, human behavior is completely determined. So going back to kind of his project, how do you reconcile, the mechanistic, view with, freedom, etc. And Kant on one end says, well, looked at as scientifically, our behavior is utterly determined. So the self of psychology, the self of science, is deterministic, exactly as the scientists say. But perhaps brilliantly or perhaps brilliantly cheatingly, he claims there's more to us than this. Why? Well, morality, and he makes this argument extensively in his ethics, and see the ethics class for how this goes. Morality requires that we regard ourselves as the noumenal selves, and regard ourselves as being free. So if we really, really want, which we do, we want this morality, we've got to accept the noumenal self. And again, this takes him into his ethics, and in the ethics course, I'll cover that in more detail. So that brings us to the end of Kant's main metaphysics. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.